one, we are going to be focusing on one of Israel's most, what can I say, the most renowned museums, the Holocaust Remembrance Museum. Sari Gurnetsky, which is in charge of, she's been with Rechem, she'll tell you how many years, I don't know, I think like 20 plus years, right? So a very long time.
Very long.
And she handles now the Christian Friends of Yad Vashem. And she can tell you a little bit about that. But basically, she is a real Yad Vashem expert, and she's going to be taking all of you into the archives to show you things that are not on display to the general public, and also explain some, pretty fascinating stories of survivors, of people who perished. And I'm not going to steal much of her thunder. But before I hand this over to her, I want to just welcome you all. I want to say thank you for joining, and I hope your summers are off to a good and healthy start. And that you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I understand you can all eat in the dining room with your friends and family, which I know is a wonderful step forward. And here in Israel, we've been opening up slowly but surely. We still have a ways to go. Groups are able to come here with special permission, but not individuals. At the present time, and our hope is that come September, or at least after the holidays, which is the end of September, that we'll be able to welcome individuals as well. You've probably heard a little bit that we're in our fourth wave, essentially, just to kind of give you a snapshot. Yes, we do have a little bit of a wave going on. It's called the Delta variant, and some people who have not been vaccinated have contracted this, and there has been a small percent of people who are vaccinated who have also gotten the COVID. To our most of our understanding, that people have not gotten nearly as sick as they did the first time around if they were vaccinated. So that is a very positive thing. And we hope that it will remain, under control. I think these variants are a part of our life right now. Just kind of like, we did an inoculation for the flu. Let's hope it remains, that it's something like this as well. That, as long as we're vaccinated, that we'll be able to, fight this and have the antibodies to withstand something more serious. So that's really what's going on here. We have our new government, which is still together and still working very hard to pass new legislation, and is representing much of our country, and we're cautiously optimistic about that. And it's relatively quiet right now, so that's also good news. So I am going to turn this over to Sari. Again, thank you all for joining, and let's move on. We're going to go to Yad Vashem now.
Thank you for the trip.
So thank you, Lisa, for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. Shalom to you all. My name is, as Lisa said, Sarah or Sari Granitza. I'm the director of the Christian Friends of Yad Vashem. 1 second, I'll turn off the lights here. I think it reflects on my glasses. That's better. No, it isn't. The light
it was good.
Yeah. One more try. Okay. With what? Well, you won't see me for long because you'll see the presentation, so that really doesn't matter. I have been in Yad Vashem for many years. I started in Yad Vashem in 2003 as the Deputy Director of the International Relations Division. Let's start with the presentation, where I give a short introduction about Yad Vashem. For those of you who, 1 second, I want to share. That's what I want to do. Share. Yes. Have any of you been in Yad Vashem in the past?
No.
No. Okay, so it's good that we're meeting here today. And so I will give a very brief introduction to what Yad Vashem is and how it was established, and we'll go on from there. And while I talk about Yad Vashem, I will explain about my position and what I have been doing in Yad Vashem. So Yad Vashem was established in 1953 by the Israeli government. Yad Vashem The name is taken out of Isaiah from the verse, and within my house and within my walls, I will give you a memorial and a name. A memorial, Yad, has in Hebrew two meanings. One of them is a hand, but it's also a memorial, Ve, and name, Shem. Yad, memorial, and a name, Yad Vashem, that should not be cut off. Yad Vashem was established in 1953, as I said, by the Israeli government. Now let's think about it. 1953, we're talking about only 8 years after the end of World War II, or what we call the Shoah, the Holocaust, where 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered. We're talking about 5 years after the establishment of the very young state of Israel. And still this government understood that the survivors needed a place to go and mourn and commemorate their loved ones. And by a law, Yad Vashem was established. I will not go through the entire law, but what I want to emphasize is this. In addition to commemoration, Yad Vashem is dedicated to documentation, research, and education. Documentation, that's mainly what we will be talking about, is how do we collect all the information, documents, pictures, letters, testimonies, artifacts, anything that can tell us about what happened there. And then we learn about it, we research the facts, and then we can teach. And we will talk about that as well. Another important part of Yad Vashem, and one of our main jobs, is commemorating the righteous among the nations, those non-Jews who helped save Jews. It's a part of the Yad Vashem law, and it actually incorporates in each one of the 3 components that I mentioned: documentation, research, and education. We collect, we check that the facts are correct, and then we teach about what these non-Jewish people did during the war, saving Jews by actually endangering their own lives and many times the lives of their families. In Yad Vashem, we don't want to talk about the numbers. 6 million men, women, and children, 1,500,000 children. We can't talk about numbers. We have to talk about the individuals. I have never seen 6 million. I actually don't know what that means. I do understand what one father, one mother, one family, at the most one community, what that means. And that's why, going back to the name Yad Vashem, we want to give back the names. If the Nazis wanted to take away the individuality, the faces, the names of the people, give them numbers on their arms, we want to give back the individual stories, because each and every one is an entire world. Yad Vashem, as I mentioned already, was established by the Israeli government. 1/3 of our budget comes from the Israeli government, but 2/3 come from donations. So going back to what I did in the past as the Deputy Director of the International Relations Division, that's what we do. The International Relations Division fundraises around the world. In the last 2 years, I became the director of the Christian Friends of Yad Vashem. That's the Christian Friends was established many years after Yad Vashem was established. It was established only in 2006. We had Christian directors, and I'm proud to be the first Jewish Israeli director of the Christian Friends. And I think this just teaches us about the connection, the bridges, the friendship that we're actually building here. As Elise said, we will go into the Yad Vashem archives, which, as I said, we gather there everything that we can get our hands on. So today we have some more than 210 million pages of documentation. We have 500,000 pictures. We have 131,000 testimonies and growing, because this was correct to a few months ago where I took the information, but we collect all the time and the numbers are growing all the time. And what we see here is this file cabinet is the file cabinet, the original file cabinet from Mauthausen, from the camp Mauthausen. This is a postcard that was written. And so we have different things, and let's start our tour in the Yad Vashem archives. And what we will do today is we will go through a virtual tour of Auschwitz, different times in Auschwitz and different things that are related to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was the labor and death camp that was built in Poland by the Nazis. In the beginning, there was only what we call today Auschwitz I, and in 44, Auschwitz II, or what we call Buchenwald, was established. Regarding questions, I would prefer that you write the questions in the chat or write them down, and after I finish, we'll give time for questions and answers. Is that okay? Okay?
Yeah, or we can just add the questions at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to share with you the file that we built about Anna Goldberg. Anna Goldberg was in France. She was caught and put on a train, and she was going somewhere. She ripped a piece of paper out of her notebook that she had with her in her bag, and she wrote a note to her mother, starting with "Dearest Mother," it's in French, and she concluded with her own home address. She rolled up the note and threw it out of a crack in the train. A train worker found the note. He was so moved from what Anna wrote here that he made sure to send it to the family. Many years later, a cousin of the family, who is actually former president of the state of Israel, the father of our newly elected president, Bougie Herzog. So his father, Chaim Herzog, is the cousin of Anna Goldberg, and he is the one who brought the note to Yad Vashem. So one of my colleagues in the archives translated the letter, and this is what Anna wrote. Dearest Mother, I left Renzi yesterday, and I am now on the train. We're going towards Metz, but I do not know whether we shall stop there, as people are saying that the journey will last 3 days. I have a lot of courage. It's a bad period I have to cross. 1 second, excuse me. Raga. I have a lot of courage. It's a bad period I have to cross. I truly believe that I shall see you again, dearest mother, in a few months. You must be very brave and you must not be sad. For the moment, I'm with friends for Poutiers. I shall always be able to manage one way or another. It may be difficult for me to write. Do not despair. I always think of you. Do not be too unhappy. My morale is very good and I have a lot of courage and hope. She goes on and she concludes, we are thousands in my situation. I shall come back soon. Wait for me patiently, dearest mother. 1,000 kisses, Nana. You know, we're sitting here today in 2021 talking about ghettos and camps and gas chambers. But back then in 41, 42, that was unprecedented. Yes, the people knew about World War I. They knew that wartime is difficult. Many times the men were taken to fight in the army. There wasn't enough money. The people were taken to work, but killing thousands, millions of people, that was unprecedented. And she truly believed that she will survive. There are thousands in her situation. She'll come back. So who is Anna and what really happened to her? One of the Holocaust survivors from France is a gentleman by the name of Serge Klarsfeld, you might have heard of. He was a writer and a Nazi hunter, and he wrote many books. One of the books is actually a collection of lists of deportation. If you look under train number 34 that left Paris and arrived in Auschwitz in September 1942, you look under G, you find Anna Goldberg. So if Anna didn't know where she was going, we now know that she arrived in Auschwitz in September 1942. But still, how old is Anna? What did she look like? You know, so many questions. Is she a teenager? Is she a woman? Is she young? Is she old? Her sister, Anna's sister, did survive. And one of Yad Vashem's first projects was collecting pages of testimonies. Families, friends filled out information about their families and people who were murdered in the war, who died in the war. And Anna's sister gave us a page of testimony and a picture of Anna. So if you look at the page of testimony, she was born on June 20th, 1920. So in September 42, she was 22 and a half years old. Her mother's name is Esther. Her father's name is Reuben, very Jewish names. And her sister writes here, Deportée à Auschwitz, September 42. Her sister filled this page out in 1981, many years after the war. A lot of families were not willing to accept the fact that their loved ones will not come back. And it took them many years to fill out a page of testimony. Filling out a page of testimony is as if we're saying, accepting the fact that these people are not alive anymore. So in 81, Anna's sister gave us a page of testimony and Anna's picture. So again, as I said before, if the Nazis wanted to eradicate the Jewish people, to take away the faces and the names and the individual stories, we give back the name, the face, and the person, giving back. We're not talking about numbers, but we're talking about people. But if we go Auschwitz, we're talking about Auschwitz, it's, you know, something as if we all know that there was a camp there, but it didn't always exist, the camp. There is a city in Poland by the name of Auschwitz. But the camp Auschwitz was established by the Nazis. And once they decided where to locate the camp, that was supposed to be somewhere that is convenient to trains, for trains to arrive, they needed someone to run the place. And the person chosen for this important job was a man by the name of Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess was a German Nazi officer. He was married and he had 5 young children, beautiful children. And they had to relocate from Germany to Poland. And he requested to have a house close to the camp. So if you can see here, the pink square, that's the house, and this is the camp. So this is very close. The only thing separating the house from the camp is a fence. It was a beautiful house with a beautiful backyard where the children could play. They had a slide. They had a small pool that they could play in. And Rudolf was very proud of his position and of the camp that he was running. And he used to invite other Nazi high-ranked officers to come and spend the weekend or holidays in his house. And he had a guest book. These people used to write in the guest book. And when you open the guest book and you see the different handwriting things are here, different people wrote, but this caught my eye. Why? Because of the date, July 1942. July 1942, that's close to when Anna arrived in Auschwitz, right? We said that Anna arrived in Auschwitz in September 42. So this is about a month and a half before Anna arrived there. And I was interested to know what this person wrote, because what was his experience as a Nazi in that same place? So I asked one of my colleagues to translate the German for me. And what this person wrote is, he wrote this to Rudolf: I want to thank you for the nicest vacation me and my family ever had. So on one side of the fence, people are being murdered. At that time, about 5,000 Jewish men, women, and children were murdered every day. And on the other side of the fence, they were having the nicest vacation. Another person wrote in the album, thank you for the outstanding tour of the camp, which means he was inside, he knew what was going on, and still it was a beautiful tour, an outstanding tour. Thank you for the important work that you're doing. You know, when going back to the backyard and think and the vicinity between the house and the camp, if you sit in the backyard and having a 4 o'clock cup of tea, you can see what's going on in the camp. You can hear the shouting, and worst of all, you can smell the flesh being burned, because the gas chambers and the crematorium are right here, not far from the house. Rudolf Hess was caught after the war. He was trialed in the Nuremberg trials, and he was sentenced to death. And he was hung in Auschwitz, right in between the house and the gas chambers. And that's how we received his guest book, because when he was caught, he had with him the guest book. And that's how Yad Vashem received it, because after the trial, it was given to Yad Vashem. If we'll go fast forward, by 1944, this was in 1942, what we saw about Anna and the guest book of Rudolf. But if we go fast forward to 44, by that time, the Nazis were already losing the war. As long as they were winning the war, the Hungarian government was collaborating with the Nazi government, with Hitler, with the Nazis. And the Jews were able to live in Hungary. They were not sent to the camps. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable. A lot of Jewish families from other places in Europe tried to escape and make their way to Hungary. A lot of families tried to send their children to Hungary. But once the Hungarian, the Nazis started losing the war, the Hungarian government, Horthy, at that time, decided to collaborate with the Allies, England, Russia, etc. At that time, once that happened, Germany invaded Hungary, and they started sending the Hungarian Jews to the camps. They prepared Auschwitz, and they built another camp, which was called Birkenau, or Auschwitz II, about 2 kilometers away from Auschwitz I. And trains with Hungarian Jews were sent there. Within 56 days, spring of 44 until the summer of 44, spring, summer of 44, 56 days, almost 500,000 Hungarian Jews, men, women, and children were sent to Birkenau. And in Birkenau, there were 4 gas chambers, and they were murdering some 13,000 Jews a day. If we'll go towards the end of the war, a young woman, she was about 18 years old, Lily Jacobs, was very, very sick. At the end of the war, when the Allies were approaching the camps, the Nazis started evacuating the camps and taking the prisoners by foot to Germany. And that's what we call today the death marches. So many Jews died along the way while marching. Who did they leave behind in the camps? Those who were extremely sick, were not able to stand up at all. And it was clear that within the hours, they will not be alive anymore. Lily Jacobs was one of those people. She was very, very sick, and she did not go out on the death marches. When the Nazis left the camp, one of Auschwitz's sub-camps, she tried to find something, a blanket or something warm to put on herself, as she was with high fever and very cold. Also, she tried to look for something to eat. When she went into one of the empty offices and opened up one of the closets, she saw something that looked like a blanket, and she pulled it out. With it fell an album. When she opened the album, she saw a picture of her rabbi from her community, and then she saw a picture of a group of women. She found herself. That's her. This is an enlargement of her. Sorry, this is Lily. After already she was shaved. She found a picture in the album of her two younger brothers. She took that album with her. After the war, after rehabilitation, she immigrated to the United States. She lived in Florida. And many people heard that she has an album with pictures of the community. And survivors didn't have anything from their families. And many of them came to Lily and asked her for a picture. They wanted to see the album. And if they found a picture of their own family, Lily was so kind, she just gave away pictures. Very quickly, she understood that it's not something that is personally hers. It's something that belongs to the Jewish people. And she decided to donate the album. You see here the book, the album itself. She donated it to Yad Vashem. This is the former chairman of Yad Vashem, Tolka Arad, Professor Tolka Arad, who just passed away 2 months ago, where Lily Jacobs is handing over the album. This is our former president, and this is the former education, איך אומרים? שר החינוך, Minister of Education, Zvulun Hamel. So let's start looking at the album and what was documented and who were these pictures taken by. So this is the first page after the picture of the rabbi, which is the first page. Following that, you see pictures of trains. You see the angle from where these pictures are taken. We know today to say that the pictures were taken by 2 professional Nazi photographers. The Nazis wanted to document the process of the trains, how an entire train arrives in Auschwitz, Birkenau, and how quickly it's emptied and sent back to bring in another group of Jews. So if you look at this picture, this train, the doors are already open, it's empty. On the ground here, we see the belongings, the small bundles that the people brought with themselves. The Nazi officers are walking in between the 2 trains. This is the newly arrived train. The doors will not be opened until this train leaves the ramp. Let's think about what's going on inside this train. We're talking, as I said earlier, about spring, summer of 44. Of course, no air conditioner in the train, no chairs in the trains. In each cattle car, There is about between 80 to 100 people, no windows, no restrooms, buckets, two buckets are poked in each cattle car, which fill up very, very quickly. The train ride takes about 5 days. Older people, younger people, women, men, babies, all of them are together. No, hardly any food, no water. All of that is what's going on inside. People are fainting, people are vomiting, women are giving birth, people are dying, and they will not open the door until the first train leaves the ramp. When they do open the door and the Nazi officers start yelling that the people have to get off, that's easy to say, but there are no steps. How, and these are high, it's a high step for older women, older men. It's difficult to get off the train. For the younger mothers with their babies on their hands, it's difficult to get off. For the children, it's difficult. And we're talking here about an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community from Hungary with many children. You can see here an older people, all of them with the yellow star on them, mothers, grandmothers holding the babies, the children. And you see here, we see here that the first train has left and only the train that is with them, that they arrived on, is still here. The people are taken off the train and they're they're yelling at them and shouting at them. They're organized into two lanes, one for men and one for women and children. And the selection will start now. And the officer standing in the front will tell the person if he goes to the right or to the left, if they're going to a labor camp or they're being sent immediately to the gas chambers. And if we look at these pictures, we can see these young women who have no children with them, they're being sent to the right? They're taking a right. If you look at this picture, again, she's taking a right. She's looking backwards. Who was she separated from? Maybe her mother, maybe her younger sister, maybe her child, or a friend who didn't look as healthy as she is. But if we look at this picture, can you see that this woman is holding a baby? And she's obviously going to the left. The Nazis didn't want anybody crying or yelling. They wanted the process to go very smoothly. So they didn't pull away the children from the mothers. They had enough manpower. So whoever has a child will go immediately to the left. Whoever is young enough to work and has no children will take a right. Many times, you see here, these men who are wearing striped suits, these are Jewish prisoners who their job was to organize the people in two lanes. But these Jewish prisoners knew very well what was about to happen. And they tried to whisper to the women without being caught that they should give their children to the grandmother or to an older woman standing by. And an older woman was someone who is older than 40. It doesn't have to be 120. But why? Because they knew that an older woman doesn't have a chance, a child doesn't have a chance either. But a young woman in her 20s or in her 30s might be sent to a labor camp, and by that, they might be saving her life. But these young women, who many of them gave the children to the grandmother, as I said before, it's wartime, it's fine. The grandmother will take care of the child, and at the end of the day, or maybe at the end of the week, or if in the worst case, at the end of the war, they will reunite. Who could have imagined that these people are being taken to gas chambers? If we will look at the following pictures, we will see that here we have only women with children. We'll see older women going with children. These are people who are already doing their way to the gas chambers. We do not have pictures from inside the gas chambers. We do have pictures from people outside the gas chambers, waiting their turn. And in this picture, this woman is pregnant, holding her son's hand. We have another older woman holding a child's hand. These people are waiting their turn in the gas chambers, which is behind them. The album, which is a big album with a lot of pictures of men and crippled people and older and people and younger people, it ends with a picture of the gas chambers and a picture of the crematorium. An entire community that was fully functioning and fully alive just 5 hours earlier, all that is left of it are the ashes. I don't want to conclude our virtual tour in the archives because there's something else that I want to share with you. In this, with the Auschwitz album, I want to share with you the story of the Jewish spirit, because the Nazis could beat the Jewish people and starve them and murder them, but they could not destroy the Jewish spirit. So from the community, I will go to tell you the story about one family, the Stern family. Naftali Stern was married to Bluma. They had 4 little children. The oldest was about 10, and the youngest was about 1.5 years. And they were an Hungarian family. They lived in the Satamil community. Naftali was a cantor back home. And they were an ultra-Orthodox family. Like the rest of the Hungarian Jews, they were sent to Auschwitz. We already know what happened to families when they arrived in Auschwitz. Immediately, the family was separated. Naftali was put in the men's lane, and Bluma and the kids were in the women's lane. Bluma holding her baby on her arms, and 3 little kids holding her skirt. She had no chance of survival, and immediately, she and the kids were sent to the gas chambers. Naftali, who was young enough and strong enough, was sent to a labor camp, the Wolfsburg labor camp, which was a sub-camp of Auschwitz, but it was far away from Auschwitz in Upper Silesia. I was actually, a few years ago, in 2016, I was in that area, and since I know Naftali's family, I really wanted to go and visit the camp, because sometimes you tend to think labor camp, that's not so bad, that's manageable. So I said, I have to see where he was. And these are pictures that I took from the camp. In the Wolfsburg camp, it was a camp near a big mountain. As I said, Upper Silesia, very, very cold. With a lot of snow. I was visiting in Poland in February. In other places where I visited, there was no snow. When I went to Wolfsburg, there was a lot of snow. The Jews were supposed to dig into the mountains, as you see here, this tunnel, with these carts, take away the stones so that the Germans could move their ammunition factories into the mountain, so that the Allies will not be able to bomb the ammunition factories with their air force. These tools that you see down here are all made from metal. And the people who worked for 12 hours in these tunnels held these tools up towards the ceiling, cleaning, because they used to bomb the mountain, and then they had to take off the pieces of stones that were caught onto the ceiling. Very difficult work. I held one of these tools. It is so heavy. I couldn't hold it for 5 minutes, let alone 12 hours, thinking about the clothes that they had, the horrible shoes that were made from wood in the very humid and muddy grounds there, with the minimum amount of food they received there, with so limited amount of calories. Taking all that into account, the conditions were horrible. As I already mentioned, the Jews, the Hungarian Jews, were sent in the spring summer of 44. Naphtali arrived in Wolfsburg in the summer of 44, and the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, New Year's, was getting closer. 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, he decided that as an Orthodox Jew, as a cantor, he wants to write down the prayers of New Year's. But of course, he didn't have any prayer book with him or any writing utensils. With his daily piece of bread, he went into one of the inmates who had a cement paper bag, and he offered him a bargain. He told him, I will give you my piece of bread and I will buy from you your paper bag. That was worth a lot. I mean, a piece of bread could make the difference between life and death. Naphtali bought that paper bag. On another day, with another piece of bread, he bought a small piece of pencil, and now he is rich. He has pencil, he has paper. He ripped the paper bag into small pieces of paper, and at night, in his barracks, he sat down and wrote in Hebrew the entire prayer of New Year's, which was dangerous in itself, because if he would be caught, he would be punished. He would be hit, he might be murdered, but he took the risk and he wrote it and he kept it on himself until New Year's arrived. And then he asked the officer to let him have a short ceremony. He wanted to be able to pray, to collect some people together, at least 10 Jewish men to pray together. The officer was in a good mood and he said, fine, instead of breakfast, you can do whatever you want, but after that, work has to be done and we're going to work. Naphtali was happy. He went into the barracks and with a group of friends, and they started praying. Survivors who were there said that it was much more than 10 people. The entire barrack was full, and people were standing outside listening to Naphtali's beautiful voice and this beautiful prayer. I just want to share with you, we don't have it here, but on the last page of his prayer book that he wrote the names and dates of friends of his and community members that were with him in the camp and died from disease, from brutality, from starvation, hoping that maybe Naphtali himself will survive and he will be able to commemorate these people, or maybe he'll meet their family members and he will be able to share this information with them. And actually, we see here the documentation of what was happening in the war started in the war itself, not with Yad Vashem in 1953, but the Jewish people in the war started documenting as much as they could. Naphtali survived, and after the war, he immigrated to Israel, and he remarried, and he had 5 children, and he lived in the Orthodox city, which near Tel Aviv, in the center of the country, where I grew up. And he came to Yad Vashem a few years ago to give us his testimony. And while he sat with us and told us his story, he took out of his jacket an envelope with very dry and yellow pieces of paper, and he shared with us the story. But he said, but I only have one request. Will you allow me to come every year before New Year's to take this envelope so that I will have it with me when I'm the cantor in my community today in Bnei Brak? Because every year when I pray and I'm the cantor, I hold this envelope under my right hand. This is the only memory I have of my previous life and my previous family. Well, of course we agreed, but we never had a chance to keep that promise to Naphtali because he passed away just a few months afterwards. And in his diary that he wrote after the war, he said that this writing this prayer and giving it to Yad Vashem was important because he wanted to teach the younger generation that the Nazis could not break the Jewish spirit. And that's what I said earlier. And it's important for us to teach this to the younger generation, that the Jewish spirit, and we see it when we visit Israel today and you tour the country with Elisa and you see what the Jewish people and many of them survivors have built in this tiny piece of land. Much of what we have today in Israel is thanks to the survivors who came here and rebuilt life and rebuilt families. And many of them say that their revenge in the Nazis is the grandchildren and grandchildren and everything that they have succeeded to do in our Jewish homeland. But why is it so important to tell our children? We can say this is something that happened almost 80 years ago. Let's go on with life. But even in Joel, and we find it in the Bible in more than 100 different places that we are commanded to remember. And if we look at Joel, it says, has the like of this happened in your days or in the days of your fathers? Tell your children about it, and let your children tell theirs and their children, the next generation. We also find the survivors themselves that ask that we shall never forget. And I want to share with you a letter that was written by Dr. Elchanan Elketz, who was the head of the Jewish Council in the Kovno ghetto in Lithuania. He wrote this letter to his son and daughter, Joel and Sarah, who he managed to send to England before the war. He wasn't able to escape, but he managed to send his children. And this is his last letter to them, and this is what he wrote. This is the original letter, and I'm reading the translation. He obviously wrote it in Yiddish. My beloved son and daughter, I am writing these lines to you, my beloved children, when we are already here in the valley of death. Remember, both of you, what Amalek has done to us. Remember that and never forget it for the rest of your lives, and pass it on as a holy testimony to the future generations. So he's actually saying what's written in Joel, and we'll see later in other places. The Germans killed, slaughtered, and murdered us tranquilly and with peace of mind. I saw them. I stood among them. When they sent many thousands of men and women, infants and babies to be killed. I am writing at a time when many broken souls, many widows and orphans, many naked and starved are on my doors asking for our help. He's the head of the Jewish Council. They're asking for his help, but there is no way that he can help them. But I'm weak and there is emptiness inside me. And my soul is gone and there are no words on my tongue. But you, my beloved, will have insight and understand what I wish to tell you at this time. He couldn't write everything in the letters because the Nazis read them before they were sent out. So he is writing the word Amalek, which is something that a Jewish person will understand, which is written in the Bible. And he's telling them, you'll understand without me having to write everything. And he concludes and writes, I close my eyes for a moment and I see both of you standing in front of me. I hug and kiss you and tell you that I'm your loving father to my last breath. On July 44, Dr. Elketz was sent to the Landsberg concentration camp. It was a subcamp of Dachau in Germany, in which, and on October 17th, he died in that camp. But we have to remember that the Holocaust didn't start with as I said before, it didn't start with the ghettos or with the camps or the gas chambers. It started with education and propaganda and indoctrination. And what we see here is a caricature that was published in 1933. And we see here something that was published in 2019. But unfortunately, since then, there were, and especially in the last year with the COVID pandemic, there is so much anti-Semitism in newspapers, in the social media. And we have to understand that hate crimes start with this, and it is our responsibility to stop it before it evolves. And we can't by this say that we didn't take part of this. We were just, someone else did this. I want to share with you what Pastor Martin Niemöller said. First, they came for the socialists and they did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the communists and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. And that's why it's important to fight against anti-Semitism, because it's horrible. But anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. And when anti-Semitism starts, it evolves and we see other hate crimes. And that's why we have to continue and do the educational work that we do. And if you remember, an hour ago when we started, I spoke about the educational work that Yad Vashem does, and that's extremely important. We have three major pillars in Yad Vashem. So we saw the archives where we collect everything. We have the research department, which is extremely important, because today a lot of people and governments do not deny the Holocaust, they just distort it, distort the facts. And having the research department in Yad Vashem, making sure that we can reply with very, very accurate information is extremely important. And we have the school where we educate the next generation. If Yad Vashem's slogan is remembering the past and shaping the future, that's where it's done. So Yad Vashem, in addition to the school, to the museums that we have, which is also a tool of education. And in addition to the archives, we have the school. And in Psalms 78, it says, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. It is our responsibility to pass on the story of the Holocaust, because there's a message that we cannot allow this or anything of the sort to happen. If this happened, then we have to learn from it. And that's what we do. And that's why I think the Christian Friends of Yad Vashem is such an important component of Yad Vashem, because someone asked me not long ago, when did you tell your children about the Holocaust? I didn't have to tell my children about the Holocaust because their grandparents are Holocaust survivors. They were born into this. This is a part of their DNA. But Christian children, that is, and especially in the United States, because the European people, it's part of their educational program, it's part of their heritage as well, because depending where you're in Europe, it's part of what happened to their family. But in the United States, unfortunately, and we see it in surveys that are being done, the younger generation don't know. And going to churches, that's what I do today. I go to churches. I have seminars for Christian leaders in Yad Vashem. We have online webinars educating these people so that they can go back to their communities and talk. I was just 3 weeks ago in Houston, and I spoke in a church 3 times, in that same church, for 3 different groups. It was for people who don't know much about it. And at the end of the day, a young girl, 9 years old, came over to me and brought me a drawing with, and very, very beautiful and very, very sweet. And I'm sure that this girl, you know, when I was speaking, I said maybe it's too much for because there were families there, and maybe it's too much for these kids. But after she brought me that drawing, I said to myself, she will not forget and she will not be a bystander. And that is what our job is. And we need our friends and our supporters to help us continue with this very, very important mission that we are doing. So thank you very much, Lisa, for inviting me today. And thank you for participating and listening to me.
Thank
And
you,
if you have
Sarah.
any questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's always difficult to hear these stories, and you know, it's no matter how much I've learned about the Holocaust, and I've heard your presentation before, I always walk away with something new. You know, it's like a shot that all of us who know and what happened and have it in our DNA, we can't hear enough. You know, we always have to be reminded about all those faces of all those names of people that we just never knew and could have had a life and perished, you know, just because they were Jewish. So I want to see if any of these ladies or Vernon have any questions before we say goodbye.
I just want to say that it's very important to tell personal stories because it really brings it home. And my mother-in-law was part of the Shoah project. She was a German refugee. Fortunately, she got out, but um, it's very, very moving and very important.
So
Thank
she
you,
was a
Ruth.
part of the Spielberg project of the collecting testimonies.
Right.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yes. Ruth, are you trying to say something? You're on mute.
Yes, you have to unmute yourself, Ruth. Bottom left corner. I had to. Bottom left, and then just click on the mute button and then unmute it. Ruth Robbins, yeah, on the bottom left corner.
Can you unmute her, Lisa?
Now she has to unmute herself.
Oh, there she goes. She did.
Okay, good.
No, she didn't.
No, she didn't. Ruth, bottom left corner of your screen, there's a mute button. And just click on the button on the bottom left.
I can
There you
barely
go. There
focus
you go.
on, I am lucky to be one of the survivors. And I think the point you make about spreading to our Christian friends is so important. And to have you reinforce that, because I just can't speak. I'm just totally blown away by your by the Zoom, and forgive me. I just can't even speak. I'm totally.
So Ruth,
Take a breath.
first of all, I want to apologize. I should have started with asking who has a connection to the Holocaust. So both, Ruth, where are you from?
From Austria, Salzburg, from Austria. But, you know, my grandparents, and everybody has a story. And this survival guilt is an ongoing kind of thing that was just reinforced by but I had to hear and to zoom into you and to find out, even though I had been to Israel many, many years ago, I did not visit. It was not there at the time, Yad Vashem. And I'm so glad that I was able to sit here and listen, and thank you for all the work that you do. I don't know how you do this all the time, but
So thank you for what you're saying. I imagine that many, many years ago, Yad Vashem existed, as I said, from 53, but it went through a major change, mega change in 2005. So before that, not all the groups coming to Israel came to Yad Vashem, but today it's the second most toured site in Israel after the Western Wall. So, so that has changed. And regarding Austria, I will share with you that once in 2 years, well, the COVID changed everything, obviously, but once in 2 years, we do have a mission of Friends of Yad Vashem that we start in Europe and we go on to Israel. And we did it from Poland. It's from Holocaust to rebirth. And we also did it from Austria.
Yeah.
The story of the Jewish community in Austria is a very special one. And the history of Austria in large is very unique. So thank you for sharing, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.
More than welcome. And most of my family, my cousins are all Sabras. My family went from one part of the family from Vienna went in the late 20s, went to Palestine. So
Really?
There's a very strong connection. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, and enjoy the rest of your day. It looks like you're going to be doing something special, and I really appreciate you joining and sharing your story and your background and being present for this. And Vern, you have anything you want to add? No? Well, we will have another tour next month. I'll let Whitney know what the topic will be, and I will be sending this video so that everybody else at Brookdale who missed today can see it. So if you are in your dining room and want to share it with them, please let them know that when they get the link, they should be watching this. Okay.
Thank you.
Sari, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. And as always, I really appreciate and I enjoy our partnership and look forward to bringing real tours to you, hopefully. Yes.
But this is great for people who it's difficult for them to come at this time. Then this is a great solution. So thank you, Elisa,
exactly.
for everything.
And
have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.